All right, let's jump right in. We're talking about a country that's a total powerhouse on the world stage, a cultural giant, and a place of unbelievable contrasts. We are, of course, talking about the United States of America.
So, when you picture the US, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For a lot of people, it's the glitz and glamour of Hollywood, right? Or maybe it's the incredible science of NASA shooting for the stars. Or, hey, maybe it's that iconic image of the Statue of Liberty, a symbol of freedom known everywhere. And you know what? It's all of those things, and honestly, a whole lot more.
Okay, first things first, let's clear something up. The word America can get a little tricky, right? Because you've got the continents of North and South America, but just for our chat today, when we say America, we're zooming in on one specific country, the United States of America. You know, the USA.
So where do you even begin with a place like this? I think you've got to start with the land itself, because the sheer size and variety of the country is just staggering. It has a huge impact on everything, from the culture to the economy.
Let's talk about size for a second. We're looking at 9.8 million square kilometers. To put that in perspective, that makes the US the third biggest country on the entire planet, right after Russia and Canada. I mean, that scale is it's almost hard to wrap your head around.
And all that space is carved up into 50 states, plus the capital, Washington, D.C., which is its own federal district. And we can't forget the 5 major island territories either. But here's a cool detail. 48 of those states are all connected, the mainland U.S., but 2 of them are way off on their own. Alaska, way up in the northwest, and Hawaii, way out in the middle of the Pacific.
All that geographic variety means you get some seriously diverse climates. I mean, you can be in the far north, in Alaska, dealing with bone-chilling Arctic weather. We're talking ice, tundra, the whole deal.
But then you could hop on a plane and find yourself in a totally different world. Head south to Florida or Hawaii, and suddenly you're in this warm, humid, tropical paradise. It's crazy that it's all part of the same country.
And we're not done. Head out west, and you've got these massive, dry deserts in places like Arizona and California. Think scorching hot days and surprisingly cool nights. It's that kind of extreme variety that makes the landscape here so incredibly dramatic.
And that drama isn't just about climate, it's about elevation too. Get this, the highest point in the country is Denali in Alaska, soaring over 20,000 feet high. But then, the lowest point is Badwater Basin in California, which is actually 282 feet below sea level. What a wild difference, all inside one country's borders.
Okay, so the landscape is obviously a huge part of the story, but it's only half of it, right? A country is really all about its people. So let's talk about the folks who call this massive place home.
So, how many people are we talking about? The population is closing in on 350 million. That's a lot of people. In fact, it's the third most populous country in the world, with only China and India having more.
And with that many people, you get this incredible cultural mosaic. Here's something that might surprise you. There's actually no official national language. Of course, English is what most people speak, but Spanish is a strong second. And just like the land itself, the people are really diverse in their beliefs too, with Christianity being the most common religion.
If you had to boil down the culture, a couple of big ideas really stand out. Things like independence and individualism are huge. There's this core belief that everyone should have the freedom to go after their own goals, to chase their own dreams. That whole idea of pursuing success, it's really woven into the fabric of the country's identity.
So that brings up a big question. How did this huge country, with all these different people, become a global superpower? Let's pop the hood and look at the engine that powers its influence around the world.
It really boils down to 4 main things, 4 big pillars. You've got its massive economy, its leadership in tech, its cultural influence that spreads everywhere, and its powerful role in global organizations. And the thing is, they all feed into each other, creating this really strong presence worldwide.
Let's start with the economy. It's the biggest in the world, and it's so dominant that the US dollar is basically the go-to currency for international business. That's a huge deal. And a big reason for that strength is the second pillar, technology. I mean, think about places like Silicon Valley. They're constantly pushing the boundaries of what's possible, from the software on your phone to exploring deep space.
Next up, pillar number 3 is all about culture. American movies, music, brands, they're everywhere, right? This creates what people call soft power, influence that isn't military or economic. And finally, that's all backed up by the 4th pillar.
its seat at the table in big global groups. We're talking about being a key player in the United Nations, taking a lead in NATO, and having a ton of say in organizations like the World Bank. That gives it a major voice in how the world works.
But you can't really get the full picture of the US today without looking back at how it all started. So let's take a quick trip through time to see how this country came to be.
Okay, so the story really kicks off with 13 British colonies. The huge turning point? 1776, when they declared their independence. A few years later, in 1788, the U.S. Constitution gets signed, setting up the whole system of government. Then, fast forward to the 1860s, a devastating civil war is fought, which leads to the end of slavery. And by the time the 20th century rolled around, especially after 2 world wars, the U.S. had become the superpower we know today.
You know, you could actually see that whole journey right in the American flag, the stars and stripes. Those 13 stripes, they stand for the original 13 colonies. And the 50 stars, well, that's 1 for each of the 50 states today. Even the colors are symbolic: red for courage, white for purity, and blue for justice. It's a history lesson right there on a piece of cloth.
And this whole idea of bringing things together is perfectly summed up in the country's traditional motto. You'll find it on the Great Seal of the United States. It's E pluribus unum.
So what does that mean? In English, it's out of many, one. And that phrase just nails the entire American experiment, doesn't it? The whole concept of taking many different colonies, and eventually, people from every corner of the globe, and trying to build one single, unified country. And that's really the perfect place to leave it. Think about it. A nation that started as 13 small colonies and grew into a global power, all built by immigrants. Its story is always changing, always evolving. So the big question, the one that's still being answered today, is this. How does a country made up of so many different people, from so many different places, keep figuring out what it really means to be